Go.
Good morning from the United States Sports Academy. Once again, this is Sports Talk, and you notice we've got our new set, our new duds, and we're excited. We want to thank our technology and communications departments for setting this up. But here we are on the campus, right in Daphne, Alabama. I'm Dr. Roger Ogden, Chair of Sports Management, and I serve as your moderator. As you know, the United States Sports Academy's weekly broadcast of Sports Talk on the Google Hangout bring contemporary issues in sport to light. Last week, we talked a little bit about the baseball playoffs, and certainly it is turning out to be quite exciting. But there's one sport that seems to constantly have difficulties, and I'm not talking about NCAA football. I'm talking about the Olympics. And now we find there are more troubles with the Olympics. Nobody seems to want to host the 2022 Winter Games. And every time they turn around, it seems as though the IOC is run by the gang that couldn't shoot straight, taking off Jim Breslin's 1969 comedy novel about a tiny gang that just couldn't do anything right. In recent memory, the IOC has eliminated wrestling from the 2020 games and baseball as well, thus erasing what many deem to have been one of the major contests in the very first Olympiad. Wrestling was always a featured event. Given the Winter Olympics to the unprepared Sochi, which did not disappoint in its ineptness, awarded 2016 Summer Olympiad to Rio de Janeiro, which proved it could not conduct a serious world sporting event with the 2014 FIFA World Cup competition. And now it cannot find a city sponsor for the 2022 Winter Olympics after Oslo withdrew its bid. So what's going on with the IOC? Our panel today consists of, to my right, Dr. Steve Butler, the Dean of Academic Affairs. To my far left, Dr. Fred Cromartie, Director of Doctoral Studies, and to my immediate left, Dr. Tim Foley, Dean of Student Services. So, gentlemen, with so many of the faux pas in recent history, what are we to make of the IOC? And just this past Saturday, Patagonia, the southern region of Argentina, announced that they would be more than willing to take the 2022 Winter Games. Now, because of the Southern Hemisphere and the differences, it would mean that the Winter Olympic Games will be broadcast mostly in the rest of the world in July and August. Now, realize that the IOC and its originators and its entire structure is Eurocentric and is Northern Hemisphere oriented. What's that going to do to not just participation, but what's that going to do to viewership? So what in the world is going on with the International Olympic Committee and its entire movement? And I want to go to Dr. Cromartie because of the whole group of us here. He's probably been to more Olympiads than any of the rest of us. Fred?
Well, I think the first thing that we have to understand is that the IOC for years and years said that they were not commercially oriented. And the fact of the matter is that they turned out to be just that. They are in it for the money. They set the standards, they set the protocol, and the whole bid process is all about money. Because once you look at it, in the end, the IOC takes in all of the revenue, but yet they're not distributing any income out to help build these venues and facilities and do all of these things that these host countries are proposing that they do for them. So it's all about the money. And right now, it appears that there's very little leadership because there's no adjustment on the IOC's perspective, and to go back and take a look and say, hey, how is it that we can try to help these host countries? One of the other aspects of it is that along with bids and being awarded the games, there's a legacy project. How many of those nations actually adhere to those legacy projects? We see right now that the last Olympic venue, Sochi, those facilities are sitting idle. Those dormitories are sitting idle.
Right. I think that's been the case in many instances. and this is really, really sad. I mentioned baseball and softball having been done away with. Dr. Butler and you said that they're coming back and they're trying to reinstate that.
Well,
bring us up to date on that.
They're trying to come back, and baseball, the world organizations of both baseball and softball decided that the best way to approach it was to have a joint effort on behalf of both men's sport and softball's a women's sport as it's played in the Olympics. I want to go back to something Fred said for a second and kind of put together what he said with one of your questions, and that is, I feel that if NBC and their networks come up with the big money to broadcast the Olympics in July and August from southern Argentina, that the IOC will consider them as a legitimate site for the Olympics. I agree with you that the Eurocentric think of Winter Olympics being usually in February or March, but if NBC is willing to pay the big money to televise the games, I think that they'd just as soon do it in July and August. They've said they wouldn't reopen the process after Oslo dropped out.
Right.
Right now we've got
two
2 cities. We've got a city in Kazakhstan and Beijing. And Beijing is trying to become the first city ever to host both the Summer and the Winter Olympics.
Yeah.
So if they stick to their guns, it'll be one of those 2 cities, and obviously both in the Northern Hemisphere. One in kind of there on the.
Well, I hope the Chinese don't stick to their guns at
36.
I hope the Chinese don't stick to their guns in Hong Kong right now. They seem to be having a little difficulty there. What I wanted to go to further as a part of what we talked about with baseball and the ramifications of that, and you prompted me to think about something. NBC claimed that they just lost terrible amounts of money in the last Olympiad. Now, wouldn't adding baseball or something like that increase possible viewership, or does it have to do with time zones? What do you think?
Again, Major League Baseball is not going to play. They're not going to get the players that all Americans are used to seeing.
Yeah, they just did. What was that? Baseball World Series or World Series of Baseball?
World Series of Baseball. So you're not going to get any help. I'm really shocked with the wrestling. Baseball, softball, I can understand, but wrestling has been around since
it's well documented that Tim and I are huge baseball fans, but in all honesty, taking the wrestling away upsets me more than baseball. What the Winter Olympics have been able to take some good viewership from in the past is the fact that the NHL basically stood down for 3 weeks and let all the National Hockey League players play in the leagues. As Tim said, baseball's not going to do that.
They had a vested interest in doing that, though, because they had players in the National Hockey League that are from all over the world, and they played for their host country. So that was a way to boost and make a connection between world hockey, Olympic hockey, and the National Hockey League. Now, which is a good point, though, because baseball is getting more towards that, but it's still more towards the Latin Americans, and very few other players, because baseball's not played the world at large still just yet. Right. But let's go back to the TV. NBC has just agreed, and then the USOC has just agreed to a deal in regards to because remember, prior to Sochi and the last agreement, the broadcasting rights was basically NBC. Okay, now they've entered into an agreement that they are going to allow other host sort of TV stations in the world to be a party to televising these Olympic venues, okay?
So
and these
franchise it out.
It's sort of franchised out, okay? Now, one of the biggest things is that the latest agreement, we never did really get to how long does that agreement run. So right now, we would be safe to presume that this agreement does run for the 2022 games. So NBC is in it, invested in it for right now.
Right.
So there's not a dispute in terms of how is the viewership going to play out. The fact of the matter is it's encompassing all of the venues that would be still in it to market and to host the game.
Well, that would be the only way that they could break even if they if they franchised it out to the localities that normally might have something blocked out. Like, let's suppose that there's a star from Montana, and you know they definitely get the Montana market and so forth. So I see what you're saying. That makes sense.
But look at it from a government perspective though, too.
I understand that, but these are not governmental agencies. You know, the other
China and
countries,
Russia were though.
the other countries they are, but not here in the USA.
Not in
Tim?
Argentina.
Tim, wrap it up here. Tell us what to do.
Well, you know, one of the things interesting about Brazil, watching the World Cup, a couple games with Dr. Butler, I was surprised how damaged the grass was, how some of the facilities just got finished. I'm looking forward to seeing how it's going to play out in a couple of years in Brazil. But another thing, down in Brazil, we saw time stops for water breaks down there in some of those areas where they played. So, you know, Qatar's supposed to host the World Cup. What's going to happen when it's 120 or 130 degrees? Not only the players, but spectators as well.
And we can look back to, Fred was right on top of this, we can look back to how in the world did they ever get that bid?
You alluded to it from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Corruption is rampant, but yet they've investigated themselves, but yet we don't get to see the final report.
Right, of course.
One of the things, what was the last Olympics that actually made money for the host city? I believe it was '84 Los Angeles. And one of the-
Beijing.
Beijing did.
Beijing.
Yeah. I think the big problem that we're facing, that's the nexus of this discussion today, I think is more focused on Winter Olympics and Summer Olympics. I think the Summer Olympics are still being, you know, you said Beijing was successful. All indications are that London was successful with Sebastian Coe leading the way. And I think part of that, at least in this country, is that we're more familiar with the sports in the summer.
Yeah, that's another point I want to try to bring up, but I don't know if we have enough time. With the Winter Olympics is not a natural extension of the formal Olympiad because they didn't have skiing back there at Mount Olympus. Explaining it simply, it was an idea that grew from the modern Olympics, and this may very well be a topic for our next discussion. So with that, keep your suggestions coming in. We'd like to take a look perhaps next time at the Winter Olympics and how they're going. And who knows what's going to happen this weekend in college football. It's crazy once again. But thanks for tuning in to the United States Sports Academy's Sports Talk every Wednesday morning at 11:30. Thanks. Have a great day in sport.